What's up, everybody? It's me, Stevie, Supersmallchibiwolf, Supersmallchibiwolf here, and today I'm going to be talking about the unfortunate state of modern Sony. So yeah, I'll be talking about their games, their animes, and more. So let's get into this. So when it comes down to it, let's talk. The first thing is about their exclusives, because there are none. You know, they're very uncreative. You know, not that persistent in developing new works or anything interest-wise. And it's unfortunate to see how they went from how they used to be to now. And it's like, oh man, this is unfortunate. So yeah, they're more focused on other ridiculous things such as their subscription stuff and adding boring ass old games to one of those subscription fees and all that. And to top it all off, the return system is so bad it equals that of Nintendo. In fact, you know, me personally, from experiencing return digital related content from both, I think Nintendo is a better deal than Sony, you know, when it comes down to returning actual products or, say, build things. Me personally, I don't do a lot of digital stuff, but like DLC and stuff like that, you know what I mean? So yeah, I think, you know, a lot of people like to talk down on Nintendo for those things, and don't get me wrong, Nintendo has their fair share of issues, but I think a lot of people are really giving a pass to Sony or just not realizing how theirs are. So yeah, that's one thing that I hear a lot about, you know, or don't hear a lot about. You know, they talk about Nintendo, but never Sony return policy. So to me, that was always kind of weird. So yeah, next thing I want to talk about is they just rely on the same, you know, same type of games, let's say, walking simulators and, you know, all that stuff. And I feel like back then, Sony was really persistent on covering different genres, you know what I mean? You know, and I feel like they lost that. They lost that special charm they used to have, you know? Whether it's like arcade-style games or all-out adventure action type games or something really interesting and fun type games. Now it's, it just feels the same, you know. I just personally haven't been into the exclusives of Sony. Me personally, I think PlayStation has been surviving off the third-party games for the longest time, you know. But yeah, I feel like other third-party companies always really, you know, don't get me wrong, Sony had, you know, they had a few of like really amazing IPs, right? But the third-party companies really helped out Sony, you know, throughout the generations. Not saying Sony never had exclusives or any IPs that they made, because they have had many amazing ones. But, oh man, in recent times, they really haven't been doing as much, you know what I mean? When it comes down to the exclusives, which they basically put it away and they just never brought it up again. And that's very unfortunate, especially with this generation. And it's just like, what? Why? You know, it just, I don't know. I feel like when it comes down to Sony, they really are confusing. And that's another thing which I have an issue with Sony. Their business practices are very confusing and anti-consumer and just really twisted nowadays. And it's really unfortunate and weird how they went from PS4 generation to PS5 and seeing how this really just block. You know what I mean? Just so yeah. Now the next thing is, they focus more on raising prices and improving their first party, like just pushing out their first party IPs that they constantly just relying on, then creating new ideas or focusing on improving the existing subscription base. You know what I mean? For example, before making this video and, you know, finalizing everything, I was like, yeah, let's just watch some stuff. You know, it was a busy day and all that, and oh man, I haven't been on PlayStation for some time. Ah man, but let me just tell you, I turn on, like, you know, I go online and the first thing I see is PlayStation got hacked. What the fuck? Like what? What? Oh, PlayStation is offline or something like that. Something like that. You know, it got hacked offline, or is offline having issues with their servers, and I'm like, yo, that's an interesting thing to bring up in today's video. So it's like, dude, why you raising the prices for what? You know what I mean? That's just so idiotic. And let me remind everyone, look, I've talked about Nintendo. I've talked about Nintendo's situations and issues. But at least Nintendo is affordable. They give a lot of games, and when you buy one of their consoles, at least you're getting an exclusive. Okay? And I'm talking about console exclusive. Obviously, before someone brings this up, anything could be emulated on a gaming PC. Okay, that's not the point. I have had this conversation with a lot of people, and don't get me wrong, and have fun with the, Neo Geo emulators, wonderful, and I feel like when it comes down to it, Sony really is focusing on other things, but not the important things. You know what I mean? And it's very interesting to see how crazy and just chaotic they tend to get. And when it comes down to gaming companies, right? Especially the gaming console companies, Sony and Nintendo especially, you know what I mean? Because we've seen companies come and go, console manufacturers come and go, or just giving up completely, right? Back then Sega used to make gaming consoles, And when it comes down to Nintendo and Sony, it's very interesting, you know what I mean? Like, they really have their really highs, lows, highs, lows, highs, lows. And it's like, every time, man, it's like, they forget, their steps and sacrifices or stuff. And then when they reach the tops of the tops, they act dumb. But then when they are just doing their thing, they just give up eventually. For example, Nintendo, you went from the Wii U, then the Switch, and Switch 2. You know what I mean? Like, Switch, I'm not saying Switch 2 is a dead console like the Wii U, but like, hey, I pay attention on the Switch 2 because I plan to get it still later on when there's like variations or like OLED or better games. You know what I mean? Not just like take everything from Switch 1 and just port it over to Switch 2. That's Spawn. It's literally a backwards capability console. You're basically doing what Sony did with PS4 to PS5. But that's besides the point. Sony-wise, I think it's just self-explained. They basically do the same thing, like Nintendo. So that's why they're similar. You know what I mean? They get their ego so high, and then it's just like, it falls. And it's very unfortunate. They say they're going to raise prices or something for the subscription, but your subscription is not reliable and the security is shit. And it's just awful. You know what I mean? It's like, dude, this is ridiculous. Sony has a multi-million-dollar company or whatever, how much they cost, and they have so many things, like I believe they own Crunchyroll, Naruto, Bleach from my research, that's why it's there in the thumbnail. And you see, they have so many IPs to work with, other animes too. Why not make video games based on that? The last Bleach game that I heard that came out like a year or two ago, it was mediocre at best, I'm hearing a lot of people say. And I was researching it because I was planning to get it, but then I was like, oh, okay. I thought it was going to be something like, you know what I mean? Like, what was it? I remember playing like the first Demon Slayer game, and that was pretty cool and interesting. And I thought it was going to be like something like that. So I'm like, whew. But then I was like, oh man, really? My friends who are really big into anime, just like me, was telling me that. They were like, man, this kind of feels like this game and this. I was like, oh man, that's disappointing, man. I expected them to do like, because Bleach is a huge video game. I mean, anime and manga series, you know what I mean? And the games in the past were very huge, very loved and praised. So for me to hear that Sony, who owns Bleach and who, makes video games, they own the game and, console, PlayStation and all that, they failed on delivering. It's like, come on, Sony, what you doing? You know what I mean? I don't know, it's just very disappointing. I feel like when it comes down to it, they could easily make exclusive games using their anime IPs. You know what I mean? Just to, have something wonderful and something there to be excited for. You don't have to use your same old video game IPs. You could use the anime ones, make them into video games, and then boom, wonderful times. I feel like when it comes down to it, another point I want to talk about is that Sony, also another thing, I remember when they used to make exclusive deals. Remember when companies used to do that? That was wonderful back then. For example, they would have some of their IPs and third-party games as exclusive deals, and other companies as well would do that. For example, in recent times would be Ape Escape with Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater Delta, right? Like, why don't you do more of that stuff? Be creative with this, work with other companies, do something cool, work with companies who actually know how to make a fun game. So, yeah. And I don't know, many of these things, I've been thinking about, because me, I've been doing a lot of things, I've been going out and watching stuff, and and chilling, wonderful times. Which is another, and also busy at times, which is why I haven't been really going at it. And also, gaming, well, I enjoy making videos based on gaming, but when there's nothing fun to talk about or interesting, I don't want to just like make random stuff just to make random stuff. But I'm thinking maybe Supersmallchibiwolf will revive a few channels. A few series, But yeah, besides that, I think also the digital only future of the PS6. I'm gonna make this clear. I kind of blame both the fans, the gamers, the fans, and Sony themselves for this one. Because, man, when the hell did people decide to go crazy on something that's been a common practice for years for years now, ever since the 7th gen game consoles, the PS3, Wii, etc. You know what I mean? Digital only type games. Dude, there's many PS3 games or 7th gen gaming consoles. That's when it all started. It's not a new concept. It's not going to be, people are saying the PS6 is going to be this. Dude, there are many video games on many consoles from 7th gen and up where if you put in the disc, the hard copy of a disc, it's not going to work. Doesn't matter if you update the game, whatever, because there's many modes and many things where it makes it unplayable. You know what I mean? I remember experiencing this a few years ago, or throughout the years, you know what I mean? And there was like maybe 3 or 4 games that I remember being like, okay, I'm going to just sell it. And surprisingly, I got money for it. I was like, dude, this shit don't even work. But okay, thank you very much. And then I'm like, well, okay. So yeah, I just feel like it's just getting worse. You know what I mean? People are saying this is the beginning of the end. No, man, this is just a continuation towards the end. You know what I mean? This is just, it's really awful, very disappointing as well. You work hard, you do your best, you work hard, you make your money, you're expecting the game's gonna be amazing, and then you find out, boom, that game's dead, by the way. Sorry. What? That's ridiculous. So yeah, so with all that being that, the last thing I want to talk about is when it comes down to the unfortunate state of modern Sony is that, Nintendo, like I said, Nintendo has their situations, we all know. But I want to say one thing though. Why is it that Sony puts so much money to develop high technology gaming consoles, yet Nintendo still outdoes them with something that's basically, technology with it, the Nintendo Switch 1? Look at that compared to a PS4 or PS5. You know what I mean? Like, that's a generational console. I feel like the Switch 2 I think is the start of the next gen, But the Switch 1, like, wow, it outdid both the PS5, and it came out years before. Yeah, 3 years before. Yeah, 2017. And yeah, that's just one thing I wanted to bring up, just to say, like, yo, Sony, man, come on, man, like, put your stuff together, man, So yeah, I feel like when it comes down to this, I hope that one day, Sony wakes up, realizes what they're doing, and changes their ways. Same with Nintendo, man. Like, come on, man, what are you doing? Remakes and remasters. Who are you, Capcom? Is someone from Capcom working in Nintendo? Fucking hell, that's awful. You already know, dude. Like, Capcom's doing amazing with Resident Evil 9 Requiem, but besides that, what are they doing? You know what I mean? I'm not sure, man. But we'll see what happens with that company too, man. And Square Enix, man. Because I always put like my favorites, third party wise, Square Enix and Capcom were always really cool. They do wonderful things. But seeing the state of modern Final Fantasy, you know what I mean? It's like, what happened, man? And I think it fits this because, like, the unfortunate state of modern Sony, Capcom and Square Enix both are, very, have a history with Sony on that, So that's why I wanted to bring them up in this mix too, and also have an excuse to talk about video games even more. So with that being that, let me know in the comments what you all think. With that being that, I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and until next time. Bye.